The next day, Tara arrived at the restaurant, determined to find out Lainey's secret recipe. She spied on Kira as she was cooking, taking note of all the ingredients used. The aroma of the food was intoxicating, filling the room with spices and herbs that Tara had never encountered before. However, when she reached home that evening, Tara could not remember anything that happened at the restaurant. Once upon a time, there lived a village cook popularly known as Madame Kaya, who was the owner of a local food joint in the village, where all the men loved to eat. The restaurant, a small wooden structure adorned with colorful fabrics, stood at the center of the bustling market. Kaya's restaurant was always crowded with men of the village who believed that she cooked the best meals. People would often fight among themselves and even go as far as washing their own plates just to have a taste of Kira's meal. Because of Kira's food, many men began to refuse their wives' food, comparing it to that of Kira. This angered the women of the village, whose husbands stopped eating their meals. One day, the aggrieved women gathered, as they had all had enough of what was happening. They deliberated on what to do about Kira, as they all wanted their husbands to start eating their food again. The meeting was held under the shade of a giant baobab tree, where the women often gathered to share news and grievances. One of the women, named Elia, suggested that instead of plotting against Madame Kia, they should do everything possible to find out how she cooked her meals. Another woman named Nala disagreed, saying that what they should rather do is to ensure that they close down Kira's restaurant, because as long as the restaurant was still in the village, their husbands would never eat their food. The whole room was now filled with murmuring, as the women found it difficult to agree on what they would do to Madame Kaya. However, all their husbands were currently at Kira's restaurant, eating and praising her delicious meals. Elia, determined to find a solution, proposed that a secret spy be sent to work for Madame Kaya, as she heard that she was currently looking for a plate washer, because her last plate washer mysteriously disappeared. The women all pondered on who they would send, as Madame Kaya knew them all and would be unwilling to employ any of them in her restaurant. One of the women then stepped forward to suggest that her niece, who had just moved into their village, would be the best spy, as no one knew who she was. The niece had recently arrived from a distant town, her face unfamiliar to most. All the women screamed in jubilation as they celebrated their clever plan to uncover Madame Kaya's cooking secrets. The next day, the woman's niece, named Eileen, discreetly applied for the position of plate washer at Kira's restaurant. Impressed by Eileen's humility and neat appearance, Madame Kaya hired her without hesitation. However, Eileen noticed something strange about Madame Kaya, who told her to always enter her kitchen using her back. The kitchen was dimly lit, with an eerie atmosphere that made Eileen's skin crawl. Madame Kaya warned Tara never to enter her kitchen using her front, because the day that she did, she would regret ever disobeying her orders. Eileen, although skeptical about working for Madame Kaya, decided to take on the job of the plate washer. She spent the whole day washing plates, the scent of the food clinging to her clothes, and left the restaurant late at night when all the customers had left. After her first day of working at Kira's restaurant, Eileen returned home exhausted. Her auntie, eager to know how her day went, asked, but Tara realized that she could no longer remember all that happened at the restaurant. This was strange, as Tara wasn't one to forget things so easily. The next day, Tara arrived at the restaurant, determined to find out Kira's secret recipe. She spied on Kira as she was cooking, her eyes following every movement, taking note of all the ingredients used. The sizzle of the pans and the rhythmic chopping of vegetables echoed in her ears. However, when she reached home that evening, she could not remember anything that happened at the restaurant. Her auntie was so furious as she accused Ellen of taking sides with Kira and pretending not to remember anything that happened at the restaurant. Tara tried to explain that she too was shocked at what was happening, but her auntie found it hard to believe. One afternoon, a woman named Mama Z came to the restaurant, fuming in anger. Her husband had informed her of his decision to marry Madame Kaya, and Mama Z came to the restaurant to confront Kyria. Not knowing that she was not alone, several other women also trooped to the restaurant, accusing Madame Kaya of trying to take their husbands. The whole restaurant was now in chaos as the women confronted Kira about the alleged affair with their husbands. Madame Kaya, however, denied all accusations, stating that she had no interest in marrying anyone's husband. Amidst the commotion, Eileen quietly observed Madame Kaya. She noticed that she seemed unusually calm, almost as if she knew something the others didn't. Eileen decided to seize the opportunity to get to the bottom of what was happening. She monitored when Madame Kaya had left the kitchen and snuck into Lani's kitchen, but instead of using her back to enter the kitchen, as Madame Kaya had instructed her to, Ellen walked through the kitchen door with her front and noticed something she had never seen in the kitchen before. Ellen noticed that the whole kitchen had stains of blood, the color dark and ominous, and wondered where the blood could have come from. Immediately, Kira walked into the kitchen, holding a blood-stained cloth from underneath her dress. Madame Kaya dipped the blood-stained cloth into her pot of food and began to stir continuously. The scent that emerged from the pot was both sweet and repugnant. After a few minutes, she removed the cloth, and Tara opened her mouth in shock, as she never knew that Madame Kaya cooked her food with the blood from her menstrual cycle. Tara pretended not to notice what was happening and realized that all this while, Kira had been using evil powers to make her forget all that ever happened in her kitchen. Whenever Tara walked into the kitchen with her back, she lost all her memory of the things that occurred in the kitchen because of Kira's evil charm. However, the charm was broken immediately Eileen went against Kira's rule and walked into the kitchen with her front. Now she was able to remember everything that she saw. Eileen was extremely scared as she feared what would happen if Kira found out what she had done. At this point, Tara could not wait to close from work to go tell her auntie all that she had seen in Kira's kitchen. As night came, Tara's heart began to race so fast. She was afraid of what would happen if Madame Kaya realized that she knew the secret to her delicious meals. After washing up all the plates, Tara decided to head home when she suddenly heard a loud and evil laugh behind her. It was Madame Kaya, who blew a powdery substance on Aileen's face. A few hours later, Tara woke up in a strange room. The walls were cold and damp, with only a faint flicker of light from a nearby candle. She screamed for help and heard the faint voice of a young woman behind her in the room, who asked if she was the new plate washer. Tara replied with a yes, and the woman told her that she was the previous plate washer, who had been locked away for months. Tara felt a cold shiver run down her spine. She asked the woman why she was locked away, and the young woman revealed to her that she had broken Kira's only rule and saw the secret to her delicious meals. The young woman told Tara that Kira had locked her up in the room and always fed her once a day with an enchanted meal, which always made her forget all that she saw. However, when she noticed what the meals were doing to her, she stopped eating them and secretly poured them away so as not to raise suspicion with Kira, who believed that her memory had been wiped clean. Determined to break free, Tara and the young woman, whose name was Mira, devised a plan. They waited for the right moment when Kira was away from the house. Tara and Mira used the weight of their bodies to push hard on the door, but noticed that they began to feel weak. Madame Kaya had anticipated this and surrounded her house with a very strong charm to prevent anyone from escaping. The more they tried to walk towards the door, the weaker they became. Tara and Mira realized that they needed a different approach to break the enchantment. Immediately, Tara remembered her late father's last words to her. He had said that whenever she was in trouble, she should call out his name 3 times, and he would be there to rescue her. Eileen called out her late father's name 3 times, and suddenly she felt a surge of energy course through her body. As she approached the door again, this time the charm's resistance significantly reduced, allowing her to push the door open without succumbing to any weakness. Tara assisted Mira as they escaped into the night. They arrived at Tara's auntie's house, and Ellen shared their entire ordeal, exposing Kaya's evil practices. The next morning, Ellen's auntie, along with the women of the village, decided to confront Kira and put an end to her evil practices. Madame Kaya, sensing that her secret had been exposed, tried to run away from the village but was apprehended by the angry women who demanded justice for the harm she had caused the entire community. Madame Kaya, cornered and powerless, confessed to her evil actions. She revealed that she had been using her menstrual blood to enchant her food, making it irresistible to the men of the village. She also admitted to locking away those who discovered her secret, ensuring that they remained under her control. The women then brought the matter before the village elders, who condemned Madame Kaya for her wicked deeds. They asked why she did what she did, and Madame Kaya revealed that since her husband died many years ago, she envied all the women that were happily married and could not stand to see them happy. So, she decided to use her food to bring discord to the happy families. Everyone opened their mouths in shock as the elders banished Madame Kaya from the village forever. As Madame Kaya left the village, all the men returned to their wives to apologize for their behavior. With Madame Kaya gone, the women of the village reclaimed their rightful place in their husbands' lives, and the bonds of family and community grew stronger as everyone realized the importance of love, trust, and loyalty. The valuable lesson from the story is that greed, envy, and deceit can lead to one's downfall. It reminds us to appreciate the people and blessings in our lives and to avoid resorting to harmful actions out of jealousy or discontentment. True happiness comes from love, trust, and integrity, not from manipulating others for personal gain. Contentment and gratitude are the keys to a fulfilling life, and we should never be tempted by the illusion of greener grass elsewhere, as it often leads to regret and disaster. Thank you for watching my channel. I invite you to explore more captivating and insightful stories on this channel where every tale is filled with valuable lessons and entertainment. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to stay connected. See you in the next video. Once upon a time, in the beautiful city of Ayad, there lived a boy named Leon who never regarded others. He was so rude and disrespectful that people shook their heads whenever he walked by. He would beat up his poor grandmother whenever she tried to correct him, and even left home for days as a way of punishing her, knowing how worried she would be that he didn't return. His mother died while giving birth to him, and her mother took on the responsibility of raising him. However, owing to the way his mother died, his grandmother did all she could to avoid situations that would make him miss his dead mother, so she allowed him to get away with so many unruly behaviors. As Leon began to grow, he became so disrespectful and out of control. She would cry herself to sleep every night, praying that her grandson would one day change his ways. But Leon was not ready to change his ways. But Leon was not ready to change. He always got himself into trouble that often required his grandmother to spend huge amounts of money to bail him out. One morning, Leon strolled into the nearby market. He saw an old woman who was selling oranges by the roadside. Without asking, Leon grabbed some oranges and stuffed them into his bag. The old woman pleaded with him to pay for the fruits. "My son, please pay. These oranges are all that I have," she said to Leon, who laughed in her face and asked what she was going to do if he refused to pay. "What will you do if I don't pay? Will you come and take them from me?" he asked the old woman mockingly. As he kicked her basket with his foot, oranges scattered across the dusty road, and the old woman fell to her knees and began to pick them up with her trembling hands. People in the market gathered around and began to shout angrily at Leon. "Shame on you, Leon! Have you no heart?" But Leon did not care. He bit into one of the oranges and walked away laughing without a care. Leon was extremely stubborn. He had no respect for anyone and believed he was untouchable because of the kind of friends that he kept. He once laughed at an old man who was crossing the road with his walking stick. Leon continued to mock the elderly man, imitating his slow, shaky movements and laughing so loudly that passers-by stared in disbelief. "Look at him!" Leon shouted. "Is he walking or dancing?" he said as he laughed. The old man, hurt but calm, paused and looked at Leon with his sad eyes. "Young boy, remember this day. Every action has its consequences. You cannot run from them forever," he said to Leon, who only rolled his eyes and walked away. He had no respect for anyone, and his grandmother bore the brunt of his cruelty daily. One evening, Leon's grandmother managed to save a small amount of money after weeks of hard labor. She hid it under her mattress, hoping to buy food and medicine. But Leon discovered the money and stole it. He used it to gamble with his friends. When she confronted him tearfully, he yelled at her angrily and asked what she was planning to do with the little change. "Is it because of that little money that you are stressing me out?" he asked his grandmother, who broke down in tears and began to cry. She was so devastated, knowing that she had no money left to feed them for the rest of the week. All she worked for weeks, was gone within a flash, and this broke her, knowing that her grandson was leading a very destructive life. That night, Leon's grandmother knelt by her bedside, tears streaming down her face. She lifted her trembling hands to the heavens and cried out, "Oh God, Please touch my grandson's heart. Let him see the error of his ways before it's too late. But Leon, oblivious to his grandmother's pain, was out with his friends, gambling and drinking, without a single care in the world. The next evening, Leon and his friends were passing by the mortuary at Ring Road. He dared them to sneak into the mortuary, not caring how sacred it was. Let's go and see the dead bodies. I hear they keep them stacked like firewood, Leon said as the others laughed. Leon, who was always eager to prove how brave he was, convinced them all to sneak into the mortuary. They went in through the back, and an unsettling silence filled the space. Metal tables lined the room, and lifeless bodies lay covered with white sheets. But instead of feeling fear or respect for the dead, Leon began to laugh hysterically. Look at them stiff like dried fish. What a waste, he said, pulling back one of the white sheets to mock the lifeless body of a woman that lay beneath. The mortuary attendant, hearing some weird noises, walked in to find Leon laughing and mocking the dead. Young man, the attendant said quietly, his voice filled with anger, you have mocked the dead today, but mark my words, the dead do not forget. Leave this place now before I call the authorities. Leon and his friends burst into laughter again, completely ignoring the old man's warning. Old man, go back to your ghosts. You can't scare us, Leon sneered, waving his hand dismissively. But just as they turned to leave, Leon stopped in his tracks. With a mischievous grin, he turned back to the lifeless body of the woman he had mocked earlier. Look at her lying there like she owns the place, he said mockingly. Then, in an act of sheer disrespect, Leon touched the woman's breast, laughing loudly as his friends gasped in shock. The mortuary attendant's face went pale as he murmured under his breath, May the dead have mercy on you, boy. The group ran out of the mortuary, still chuckling, but a strange silence seemed to follow them out into the bustling streets of Iade. That night, Leon could not sleep. His room, usually warm and stuffy, felt ice cold. He tossed and turned on his thin mattress, his eyes darting nervously around the dark corners of the room. Suddenly, he heard a faint whisper. Leon. He sat up, sweat dripping from his head. Who is there? He said, his voice trembling. The whisper came again, this time even louder. You are mine, the voice said. Leon sat there, terrified. He turned on the light but saw no one. Was I dreaming? He asked himself as he felt a hot slap across his face. Leon immediately lost his ability to speak. He did everything possible to speak, but his mouth seemed numb and unable to say a word. He approached his grandmother's room, his trembling hands clutching the doorframe as saliva dripped uncontrollably from his mouth. His grandmother sat up in alarm when she saw him standing there, his wide eyes filled with terror and his lips quivering as if trying to form words. Leon, what's wrong? Talk to me, she cried, rushing to him. But Leon could only make incoherent sounds, his mouth refusing to obey him. His grandmother grabbed his face, her eyes scanning with concern. Did someone hurt you, Leon? Speak to me. Leon shook his head violently, tears streaming down his face. His grandmother's panic grew. She led him to sit on the edge of her bed, praying softly underneath her breath. God of mercy, whatever is wrong with my grandson, please have mercy. Please, Lord. That night, Leon sat by his grandmother's side, unable to sleep, unable to speak, and unable to escape the oppressive cold that seemed to cling to his skin. The next morning, word spread around the neighborhood that Leon had lost his ability to speak. His friends from the mortuary incident came to visit him, their faces pale with fear. One of them whispered, "This is not normal. That mortuary attendant warned us. I knew we shouldn't have gone there." But it was only the beginning of Leon's torment. Whenever he closed his eyes, he saw the face of the dead woman, her pale skin and hollow eyes staring at him, her lips moving silently. Objects in their small home began to move on their own. Pots fell from the shelves, the door creaked open at night, and shadows danced in corners where they should not have been. His grandmother began to hear whispers in her sleep, faint voices calling Leon's name. As the days passed, Leon's condition worsened. He lost so much weight because of his inability to eat properly. People began to gossip as they wondered what had happened to him. Some believed he had contracted a deadly disease, whilst others believed that he was cursed. They mocked him, and Leon, feeling so dejected, began to live a life of isolation. His grandmother did everything to help him, but nothing that she did worked. All the doctors that examined Leon found nothing wrong with him. As Leon's condition worsened, his grandmother grew desperate. His frail body was barely able to move, and his once proud and loud demeanor was now reduced to hollow stares and incoherent sobs. One evening, a kind elderly neighbor named Auntie Grace paid a visit to Leon's grandmother. The soft glow of an oil lamp cast long shadows on the walls as they sat in the quiet living room. She had heard whispers in the market about Leon's encounter with the dead woman at the mortuary and came to offer advice. "My sister, this is not an ordinary sickness. Take your grandson back to where this problem started. The dead do not forgive easily when disrespected," Auntie Grace said firmly, as Leon's grandmother shook her head in agreement. The cool night air seemed to carry the weight of their worry. They arrived at the mortuary the next morning, the dawn light casting eerie shadows on the building's cracked walls. They met the attendant, whose name was Elder Bayo, the same man who warned Leon about his reckless behavior. He stood at the entrance of the mortuary as though he had been waiting for them to arrive. His sharp eyes scanned Leon's trembling body as he shook his head in disappointment. "I warned you, young man," Elder Bayo said in a low voice, "for you mocked the dead, and now you have awakened something that cannot be easily silenced." His grandmother began to plead with him to help her grandson. "Please, Elder, help my grandson. Whatever it takes, we will do it. Please don't let him die like this." Elder Bayo sighed deeply, his weathered face etched with a mixture of sadness and resolve, and gestured for them to follow him inside. They were led to a small room lined with old shelves and flickering candles that cast an otherworldly glow. A faint smell of incense lingered in the air, adding to the room's somber atmosphere. Elder Bayo sat on a wooden stool as he muttered a few words under his breath. He then looked directly at Leon as he began to speak. "I have a gift," he began, "a gift that allows me to speak to spirits caught between this world and the next. The woman he disrespected, her spirit has spoken to me." His grandmother gasped, clutching her chest as her grandson sat staring blankly, his hollow eyes fixed on Elder Bayo. "The woman you mocked and touched was not just any corpse. Her name was Abeni. She died with deep sorrow in her heart. She had no family, no husband, and no children. She passed away from a broken heart, carrying the weight of loneliness into the grave. Her spirit cannot find rest because she was denied love and companionship in life." Elder Bayo's voice dropped lower. She has chosen you, Leon, to be her husband. His grandmother gasped again, her hand flying to her mouth. What do you mean, elder? My grandson marry a dead woman. Elder Bayo nodded solemnly. It is the only way. Abeni's spirit has demanded marriage. Leon must marry her, give her a proper burial with honor, and visit her grave regularly as her husband. Only then will her spirit rest, and only then will Leon be freed from this curse. Leon's grandmother wept bitterly, her frail body shaking as she clutched her grandson's hands. Leon himself, though unable to speak, let out a muffled sob as tears rolled down his face. Before proceeding with the spiritual marriage, Elder Bayo advised them to seek out Abeni's family, if any existed. After days of inquiry in the community and speaking with elders, it was confirmed that Abeni had no living family members. She had been an only child, abandoned by distant relatives, and had died alone in a small rented room. The weight of loneliness and betrayal had taken her to the grave. Realizing there was no family to give their blessings, Elder Bayo told them that the marriage must proceed without delay. Under Elder Bayo's guidance, preparations began. A small white wedding gown was placed over Abeni's lifeless body, and her hair was adorned with flowers. Leon, weak and trembling, was dressed in a white agbada representing purity and submission. Elder Bayo began the ceremony, his voice echoing in the cold mortuary room. Abeni, daughter of the earth, you are not forgotten. Today you are not forgotten. Today you are loved. He guided Leon to kneel beside Abeni's body. With a trembling hand, Leon placed a ring on her lifeless finger. A cold breeze swept through the room, and for a brief moment it felt as though the air was filled with a faint, sorrowful sigh. Elder Bayo sprinkled holy water and salt over Abeni's body and whispered final blessings. It is done. Her spirit is now at peace. The next day, a proper burial ceremony was held for Abeni. A small gathering of people attended, led by Elder Bayo. Abeni was laid to rest in a quiet cemetery at the outskirts of the town. The sound of a soft hymn filled the air as Leon, still weak but able to whisper faint words, now stood beside her grave. I am so sorry, Abeni, for disrespecting you. May you find the peace that you were denied in life. He placed fresh, white flowers on her grave and walked away with his grandmother, his head bowed low. Elder Bayo warned Leon that although Abeni was now at rest, their connection was forever. As her husband, Leon was obligated to visit her grave occasionally, bring fresh flowers, and whispering prayers for her soul. If you neglect her grave, if you forget your promise, the curse will return, even stronger. Leon nodded solemnly, knowing that he could never escape his obligation. In the months that followed, Leon transformed into a completely different person. He became quiet, humble, and deeply respectful of others. He worked hard to support his grandmother, spending hours each day tending to their small farm and making repairs around the house. He apologized to her for all that he had done to hurt her in the past. Leon also strolled to the market to find the old woman whose oranges he had tossed to the ground months ago. He found her by the corner, her face lined with age and weariness, and apologized to her for how he had treated her on that fateful day. The old woman looked up at him as tears fell down her eyes. She forgave him for all that he did, and Leon thanked her for her kindness. He handed some money over to her as payment for the oranges, and the old woman was so grateful as she began to bless him fervently. Every month, without fail, Leon also visited Ebony's grave. He placed fresh flowers on the grave and whispered some prayers for her. People in the town began to notice the change in him. They spoke in hushed tones about the boy who had once mocked the dead, but was now living a changed life. Leon has changed life. Leon has changed, they would say, revealing how the dead had taught him a lesson that he would never forget. And Leon truly never forgot. For the rest of his life, he carried the weight of his actions and the memory of Abeni the bride he never truly knew but was forever bound to in spirit. In the quiet cemetery at the edge of the town, a gravestone stood with the words Abeni, beloved and remembered, rest in peace. And every month a young man named Leon would kneel before it, honoring a promise made in fear, but kept in love. The story of Leon teaches a powerful lesson. Every action, no matter how small or insignificant it seems, carries consequences. Leon's arrogance, disrespect, and reckless behavior not only brought suffering to himself, but also to those around him, especially his grandmother. His mockery of the dead and disregard for human dignity triggered a curse that nearly cost him his life. This serves as a stark warning that arrogance and ignorance often lead to regret, and one cannot escape the consequences of their actions forever. However, Leon's story also shows that redemption is possible. By acknowledging his wrongs, seeking forgiveness, and making amends, he transformed into a humble and kind-hearted person. This change reminds us that no matter how far someone has strayed, they can choose a different path and become better. Thank you for watching my channel. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more interesting and thought-provoking stories. See you in the next video.
As she was walking, she heard a strange sound. When she turned around, to her greatest shock, she saw Ethan transforming into a half-human and half-snake. She quickly hid behind the tree so he could not see her when he turned around. Mila was so terrified and shaky. She tried her possible best not to scream or make any noise. No. 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 Once upon a time, there lived a beautiful princess named Lyra. She was the only child of her father. Her father, the king, adored and cherished her so much. Whatever she asked for, he never hesitated to grant to her. Elle had a maid named Mia, who she was very close to. They were like siblings. Anyone who didn't know them might think they were siblings. Elle was a very beautiful girl, admired by all the eligible young men in their village and across. Kings from other villages would always bring their sons to marry Lee, but she would decline, saying she didn't like any of them. Her father, the king, was worried about his daughter Laren. He asked her why she always turned down her suitors. She told him that when she saw a man she truly loved, she would bring him home. Her father, the king, accepted and told her to choose her suitor wisely. Oh. One day, Lyre and her maid, Mia, were strolling down the village, enjoying the vibrant market stalls and the chatter of villagers, when a very handsome young man approached them. He was so handsome that no woman could resist his handsome face and his captivating smile. He turned to Lyre and said, "You are so beautiful, like the morning sun. Your beauty could make a blind man see." He kept on showering praises on Lyre, and this made her blush. Lyra smiled and asked him who he was. He replied, saying his name was Nate, that he's from the neighboring village, and that he came to get some fresh fruits from the market. Ethan then told the princess that he would be taking his leave to go to the market to get the fruits before the market women sold all the fresh fruits. As he was about leaving, Elle told him if they could meet another day. He smiled and said, "Anything for you, my princess." Then he left. When he left, Mia, the princess's maid, smiled and asked Lyra why she requested to see him again. Lyra told her that she thought she had finally found the one she loved. They both laughed and left. On their way home, Lyra kept on describing the handsome face of Nate. The next morning, Lyra, the princess, could not hold back her excitement. She called Mia and told her to accompany her to see Nate. Mia smiled and teased her, saying, "I know you did not sleep last night because of Nate." The princess replied and said to Mia, "No woman in her right senses would see Nate and not think of him all night." The princess and her maid then went back to the same spot where she met Ethan to wait for him. Soon, Ethan arrived, dressed in a simple tunic that accentuated his charm. The princess was so happy to see him that as Mia was about leaving to give them some privacy to discuss, she noticed that Nate was barefooted, and she also remembered that the last time she saw him, he was also barefooted. After the princess and Nate finished discussing and having their lovely moment, Ethan was about to take his leave when the princess told him she would like to escort him to his village, but he declined and left. When Ethan had left, Mia told the princess that she noticed Ethan was always barefooted. The princess told Mia maybe he just didn't like wearing footwear. Mia told her, "Who on earth doesn't like wearing footwear?" Mia was unsettled. She was having a bad feeling about Ethan, but did not say anything to the princess. The princess kept on seeing Nate for some time, and when he declared his intentions of marrying her, Lyra was so happy that finally he had said what she had waited patiently to hear from him for so long. She took Nate to her father, the king, who accepted that Nate could marry his daughter if that would make her happy. Ethan told the king that he would be coming with his people for the marriage rites. When Ethan left the palace, Mia visited the princess in her room to discuss with her. She told her she was not comfortable with her marrying Ethan, that she didn't even really know him, and that they had not visited his village before, let alone seen his family members. The princess told Mia not to worry, that Nate meant no harm and was a nice person. The next day, Nate visited Princess Lyra in the palace and was about leaving when the princess insisted Mia should see him off back home with a fruit basket. Ethan declined and insisted on carrying the fruit basket by himself, but the princess insisted that her maid Mia carry it for him. That princess insisted that her maid Mia carry it for him. On their way to Nate's village, they reached a bush path shaded by towering trees, and Nate then told Mia that she could now go back and no longer accompany him. He thanked her for escorting him, and they both parted ways. When Mia had walked a few minutes, she realized she was still carrying the fruit baskets and had forgotten to give them to Ethan. She hurriedly went back to give it to him, but could not find him. She was surprised not to find Ethan because they had just parted a few minutes ago. She then decided to walk down the bush path further to see if she could find Ethan. As she was walking, she heard a strange sound. When she turned around, to her greatest shock, she saw Ethan transforming into a half-human and half-snake. She quickly hid behind the tree so he could not see her when he turned around. Mia was so terrified and shaky, she tried her possible best not to scream or make any noise. Ethan then walked further into the thick bush until he was out of sight. When Mia realized that he had left, she ran as fast as her legs could carry her back to the palace. She went straight to the princess's room to tell her what had happened. What? Mia hesitated over her next words for the next few minutes, but until he said, the princess was very angry at Mia. She said to her, "I know you've been having bad feelings about me marrying Ethan, so why go to this extent of lying to me about him, saying he's a monster? You know my marriage is a few days from now, and you're trying to ruin it. Mia turned to the princess with tears in her eyes and said, "Please listen to me as a friend and not a maid. I wouldn't want to destroy your marriage or plan evil for you. We've been friends since childhood. You don't really know this man very well. You've not been to his village before, let alone meeting his